Good morning, brothers and sisters. So, one of the things that has always bothered me is when I hear believers, especially the Watchman community, refer to Revelation chapter 12 as a rapture passage. Now, what I want to endeavor to do today is show within its context, because context is key and context is king in the scriptures, that the rapture is not being talked about in Revelation 12 at all. I know a lot of people use the male child to refer to the church, but if we take everything in context, we shall see. So I want to read the full context of Revelation 12 for you and just describe what is going on here in the book of Revelation. Now, to some degree, this chapter is a lot like a parenthesis in the drama taking place in Revelation. Here we have a prophetic lineup of the key individuals in the great end times drama. There are 7 major figures mentioned. Number 1, the woman who represents Israel. Number 2 is the dragon, who is Satan. Number 3 is the male child, or Christ. 4 is Michael the archangel, who represents the elect angels. 5 is Israel, the remnant of the seed of the woman. 6, the beast out of the sea, the Antichrist. And finally, 7 is the false prophet and the religious leader, or the beast out of the earth. Now, the great sign in heaven means that the vision John is about to record is extremely important. 6 other signs are described in Revelation. The description of the woman contains parallel passages to Joseph's dream about his brothers in Genesis 37, verse 9. So the nation of Israel is clearly in view. The 12 stars, then, would be the 12 tribes of Israel, Revelation 12:1. The child is the Lord Jesus Christ, who is from the nation of Israel. The woman cannot represent the church, as some suggest. The church is the bride of Christ, whereas this woman is the mother of Christ. There was much labor and political intrigue when Christ was born, which is vividly confirmed in the drama recorded by Matthew. King Herod had ordered the mass murder of male children in Bethlehem in the hopes of eliminating the one who was to become Israel's ruler. Satan, the great red dragon, comes out of the scene upholding the powers of the final world empire, the revived Roman Empire. The description given of this empire is similar to what is recorded in Daniel 7 and Revelation 13, both of which describe Satan's control over world empires. Satan is seen as supporting 7 heads, or 7 rulers, and 10 horns, or 10 nations, with authority to dictate and rule as portrayed by the 7 crowns, or 7 diadems. The red dragon's tail sweeps a third of the stars of heaven and threw them to the earth. Now, most commentators would say this verse describes part of what occurs during the tribulation, but it may be preferable to say that this looks back at what happened when Satan fell long ago, which Jesus describes when he said, "I was watching Satan fall from heaven like lightning," Luke 10, verse 18. Ezekiel too spoke of this fall. "I have cast you as profane from the mountain of God," Ezekiel 28, verse 16. Whatever the case, at the birth of Christ, Satan stood before the woman, which is Israel, ready to devour the child. Now, the male child is where a lot of debate is, and this is where people try to force the rapture of the church into this passage. The male child, Christ, is born from the woman Israel and will rule all the nations with a rod of iron, verse 5. Before this happens, he is taken up to God and to his throne. He is presently seated at the right hand of the Father until he subdues all his enemies and reigns from Jerusalem, the holy mountain of Zion. And you can find that cross-reference in Psalm 110, 1 through 3. Now, I really like what Ed Heinzen says regarding the male child. The male child who is destined to rule all nations is Jesus Christ. He is the Messiah, the promised one of the Father. His being caught up, which is the Greek word harpazo, snatch away, refers to his ascension back into heaven. The Greek word meaning caught up is also used of Philip being snatched away after dealing with the Ethiopian eunuch in Acts 8:39, of Paul being caught up into the third heaven, and of the rapture of the church itself. And I think that's where the confusion lies. The imagery for the male child is taken from Psalm 2, where the Messianic Son receives the nations for his inheritance from the Father. He is pictured there as the Lord's anointed, Psalm 2, verse 2. He is the king whom God will set on Zion. God says of him, "Thou art my son, today I have begotten thee. Ask of me, and I shall give the nations as thine inheritance. Thou shalt break them with a rod of iron." Psalm 2, verses 7 through 9. Now, John does little else with the symbol of the male child here. He does not need any further elaboration. It is obvious that the child is Christ. Somebody else has said, here the gospel story is surprisingly condensed, but enough is said to accomplish John's purpose. He has shown the deadly enmity of the adversary, his defeat, and the exaltation of Christ to the place of supreme and universal power. Okay, so the male child is Jesus Christ. The drama now continues to the future, to the last half of the tribulation, during which the nation of Israel will be pursued by Satan. So this is a mid-tribulation point in the drama. The surviving Jewish remnant of that time will go into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God so that there she would be nourished for 1,260 days. Verse 6. This remnant of Israel will hide out in the ancient city of Basra, located in the region of Mount Seir, in the wilderness portion of Edom. Micah 2, verse 12. There is strong indication that Isaiah 33 is about both Israel's purging and protection during this time. The sinners in Zion will be terrified, and the Jews hiding in the mountains will have refuge in the impregnable rock and will miraculously receive bread and water. Many commentators suggest that these Jews will flee to the ancient mountain fortress of Petra, which is in the wilderness of Jordan. In heaven, Michael and his angels will wage combat against Satan and his angels. Verse 7. Though Satan and his forces were earlier cast from heaven, Satan can still communicate with God. Job 1:6. The final expulsion will take place in the future, and Satan will then intensify his deceptive attacks on the population of earth. While Satan is increasing his persecution against the righteous on earth, a voice in heaven will announce that the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ have come. Verse 10. Despite the fact that many will die from Satan's attacks, the tribulation saints will know spiritual victory because of the blood of the Lamb and because of the word of their testimony. They will not be afraid to die for their faith. Those in heaven will rejoice, yet there will be another woe on the earth, because the devil has come down to you, having great wrath, knowing he has only a short time to persecute and torment the population. Verse 12. The fact that Satan's time is short indicates that this judgment is limited to the tribulation period. This cannot logically refer to thousands of years that have transpired since Satan's fall at the dawn of creation. The woman will be persecuted by the dragon, verse 13, and will be given 2 wings of a great eagle so that she can be taken away into the wilderness to be protected. As already mentioned, this protection will last 3.5 years. Satan will attempt to cause the woman, Israel, to be swept away, but she will be protected by the earth, verse 16. Whether by natural or supernatural means, a godly remnant will be preserved by God, though according to Zechariah 13, verse 8, 2/3 of the nation of Israel will perish. While it is said that Satan will pour water like a river out of his mouth after the woman, this probably isn't to be taken literally, but may refer to a flood-like catastrophe initiated by Satan. Satan's final war against Israel will fall upon the believing Jews and the rest of her children who keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus. The Jewish people are God's chosen people, and their existence and survival are signs of the faithfulness of the Lord and truthfulness of the fulfillment of his prophetic word. So again, going back to this idea of putting the rapture in chapter 12 of Revelation, it does not go into the context of what is being described, which is Israel's future. The church is nowhere mentioned here. It is talking about Jesus Christ, the male child, who is taken up to his throne and who will rule with a rod of iron. And it's talking about what is going to happen to the Jews at the midpoint of the tribulation. God bless.